Hello and welcome to Starbound's second channel. My name is Gabriel the Bibi Capaldi and I'll be your narrator today. But before we get into today's story, please do check down below that you are subscribed to the channel. It's 100% free and helps us pop up on your feed a bit more often. The strange ships descended like a swarm of predatory insects, their hulls gleaming under Hanaria's yellow sun. Sorgara watched them break through the atmosphere without much concern. Likely just some traders, she thought, her fingers digging into the rich soil that had sustained generations of her kind. In her 300 years, she had aided countless beings across the galaxy, and once, she had even saved a human child. That single act of compassion, long forgotten in the routine of her simple life, was about to alter an unfortunate reality on the horizon. On the surface, Sorgara appeared almost human-like, bipedal with slender limbs and delicate features that gave her an elven appearance. But, where humans had hair, Sorgara's scalp flourished with symbiotic plants, small ferns and colorful flowers that maintain their vibrant hues regardless of circumstance. Her skin held a subtle green, shimmering faintly when touched by sunlight, while her elongated ears tapered to points that occasionally moved in response to sounds imperceptible to most other species. Most striking were her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and an impossible violet that seemed to shift in depth when she concentrated. They had evolved to see beauty in stillness, to appreciate the slow unfurling of a leaf over days, or the gradual change of seasons. Hanarians could sit motionless for hours, communing with their environment, their slow metabolisms perfectly suited to a life of patience and contemplation. Her hands were her most hardened feature, 5 long, nimble fingers on each, their joints allowing movement in directions human hands could never achieve. The palms bore natural calluses, currently rough from working her ancestral farmland. As she knelt in her field, those hands moved slowly through the soil, feeling each grain, each subtle change in texture that told her when conditions were perfect for planting. It was the screaming engines of the government ship that broke her concentration. Sorgara lifted her gaze to the sky, narrowing her eyes against the harsh light. The vessel hovered lower than regulations permitted, its emergency lights pulsing an urgent red that sent the local wildlife scattering. A voice boomed across the valley, unnaturally loud and disturbingly fast. "Citizens of Hanaria, return to your dwellings immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, return to your dwellings immediately. Shelter in place until further notice." The message cycled again, the urgency contrasting sharply with the Hanarian tendency toward written communication. Sorgara rose to her feet, brushing soil from her hands with uncharacteristic haste. All around her, the previously tranquil landscape buzzed with tension. Even the native insects had fallen silent, as if holding their breaths. She ran quickly toward her home, a modest structure of living wood that had been coaxed to grow into wall and archways over decades. The deliberate pace of a Hanarian walk would normally take her 15 minutes to cross her field. Today, she ran, an action so foreign to her physiology that her breath came in painful gasps. Her door creaked open with a gentle push, the old wooden hinges protesting against the sudden movement. Inside, the dim coolness contrasted with the bright panic outside. Sorgara leaned against the wall, her heart racing in an uncomfortable cadence. "Status update," she commanded, her voice activating the home's minimal technology. Unlike many species, Hanarians had never embraced technological integration, preferring to use it sparingly, only when truly necessary. A spot in the wall across from her shimmered, a simple flat-screen interface activating. No updates available scrolled across in glowing script. With shaking hands, Sorgara retrieved her virtual reality glasses from a drawer where they had lain untouched for nearly a year. The sleek device felt foreign against her skin as she slipped it on, the interface initializing as it synced with her thought patterns. "Connect to global broadcast," she instructed, and immediately her vision was filled with the face of the Planetary Council leader. His plant hair wilted with stress, the vibrant colors unchanged but the plants themselves drooping noticeably. "Unprecedented aggression," he was saying, his voice steady despite the evident strain. "The Gronax fleet entered our system 3 rotations ago, disabling our early warning systems before we could alert the population. We have attempted communication, but received only automated hunting protocols in response." The council leader paused, his features rippling with a wave of sorrow that made Sorgara's stomachs clench. "It is with profound disappointment that I must inform you that our requests for assistance have been declined. The Galactic Alliance has cited the Remote Worlds Non-Intervention Protocol, claiming our membership status as reclusive and non-committed members renders us non-essential to interstellar stability." Sorgara felt her throat constrict. The Alliance, with its promises of mutual protection and support, had abandoned them to face extinction alone. Her mind flashed to the countless times Hanarian medicinal knowledge had saved Alliance worlds from pandemics, how their botanical expertise had prevented famines across a dozen systems. "Evacuation ships have been..." the leader hesitated. "The evacuation ships designated for our quadrant have been redirected to important Alliance worlds as a precautionary measure." A wave of betrayal washed over Sorgara, so intensely that her plant hair trembled, shedding small leaves that drifted to the floor. In her long life, she had witnessed political maneuverings, resource disputes, even minor skirmishes, but never such cold abandonment. The glasses slipped from her face as she sank to the floor. Her mind tumbled back through time to a memory she had filed away centuries ago. The cold metal corridors of Trading Outpost 7, where she had been researching alien botanical samples. The screams that had led her to a storage compartment. The human child cowering inside, bleeding from a shallow wound, eyes wide with terror as a Gronax hunter stalked towards him, mandibles clicking in anticipation of the kill. She remembered how she had intervened without hesitation, placing herself between predator and prey. How she had used her knowledge of chemistry and thrown a vial of acid at the predator, scaring it away from the little human. The look of awe on the child's face when the hunter ran in fear. How she had tended his wounds with a healing paste from one of her own symbiotic plants. "What's your name?" she had asked, applying the salve to his arm. Gohar, the great galactic explorer," he had declared with all the gravity a 7-year-old human could muster, before adding in a smaller voice, "But my mum calls me something else." She had returned him to the human delegation, accepting their profuse thanks with typical Hanarian reserve, and departed on the next transport. For years afterwards, messages had arrived from Earth. Gratitude, updates on the boy's progress, invitations to visit. She had never responded, falling prey to what the faster species called the long-lived procrastination, the tendency of her kind to indefinitely postpone what seemed non-urgent. A tremendous explosion rocked the ground beneath her feet, pulling her from the memory. Sorgara scrambled to the window, her movements uncharacteristically jerky. The sky had darkened with Gronax ships, their distinctive barbed silhouettes blotting out the sun. Energy weapons lanced from their hulls, striking the capital city visible on the horizon. Even at this distance, she could see buildings collapsing, entire districts erupting in flames. With a sudden, desperate clarity, Sorgara activated her communication terminal. Earth was a minor power in galactic politics, largely isolationist since their disastrous First Contact wars. But they were also the only species she had personally aided in a way that created what humans called a life debt. The terminal activated. "Connect to Earth message relay," she instructed. "Subject, help request." She winced at the uncertainty. "Site Outpost Serenity 7 incident, approximately 22 standard years ago." A pause. Then, connection established. Legacy contact maintained in diplomatic archives. Recording. Sorgara took a deep breath. The air tasted of distant smoke. "This is Sorgara of Hanaria. I never thought I would activate this channel." She paused, unsure how to continue, anger and desperation tangling her thoughts. "Your people wished to thank me for saving one of your children. I never responded. Typical long-lived species procrastination, as others call it." Another explosion, closer this time, rattled her home's foundations. Outside, the sky burned. "My world is under attack by the Gronax, the same species I saved your child from. The Alliance has abandoned us, citing protocols and regulations that apparently matter more than lives." Her voice cracked, an unfamiliar sensation. "I don't know if anyone there remembers what happened, or if your species even lives long enough to maintain such records. I don't know what to expect from sending this." She looked out the window again, watching a Gronax dreadnought descend toward the planetary defense headquarters. "I wonder sometimes about the child. If he grew up well, if he overcame his fears after the Gronax encounter." A bitter laugh escaped her. "Now I face those same fears, but on a scale that is too much for an individual to face alone." The building shook again, dust filtering down from the ceiling. Warning signals bled across the valley as defensive maneuvers failed one by one. "If anyone receives this, know that Hanaria fell not just to the Gronax, but to indifference." She took a shuddering breath. "And if by some chance that child, or perhaps an old man now, I suppose, should hear this, I hope your life was good. I hope it was worth saving." The transmission cut off as another explosion rocked the house, sending Sorgara stumbling against the wall. Through the window, she watched in horror as the first wave of Gronax landing craft pierced the clouds, descending towards the surface of the world she had always called home. The minutes stretched like hours as Sorgara hunched beneath her window, debris raining from the ceiling with each new explosion. The transmission to Earth felt like shouting into a void, futile, desperate, and already forgotten in the chaos engulfing her world. Yet, as her terminal chimed with an incoming message, Sorgara's heart skipped erratically. A simple line of text appeared. "Hold on, we are coming." She read it again, struggling to comprehend. Hold on? Hold on for what? And who was we? Centuries of experience had taught her to be wary of empty promises. How many times had the Alliance representatives spoken of mutual protection, of solidarity among member worlds? Words were easy, especially when spoken from the safety of distant systems. "You expect me to believe humans will come when the Alliance fled?" she whispered to the empty room. The terminal offered no response, its screen now dark and silent. Sorgara paced her small home, fingers tracing the living wood of walls that had witnessed her entire life. Another explosion, more distant this time, sent a minor tremor through the floor. With a resigned sigh, she retrieved her discarded VR glasses, brushing off dust before slipping them on again. "Connect to emergency government broadcasts," she instructed. The images that filled her vision made her gasp. The entire city was unrecognizable, its elegant spires of living wood reduced to smoldering rubble. Drone footage showed Hanarians fleeing through streets choked with debris and flame, their normally carefree movements accelerated to desperate flight. "The eastern agricultural districts are completely under heavy bombardment," announced a harried-looking official, his plant hair nearly bald from stress shedding. "Citizens in these areas must proceed immediately to designated underground shelters." A map appeared, highlighting locations that blinked with alarming rapidity. Sorgara noted with grim resignation that her region was already marked in red. Evacuation no longer recommended. Stay in place, hope for survival. The broadcast switched to a senior military commander, her uniform scorched and torn. "We have confirmed the Gronax fleet contains 17 capital ships and approximately 400 smaller vessels. Their tactics remain consistent with previous encounters: systematic targeting of communication arrays, defensive installations, and population centers." The commander's eyes, sunken with exhaustion, stared directly into the camera. "For those unfamiliar with Gronax behavior, We must emphasize. They are not attacking for resources or territorial expansion. Despite their technological capabilities, the Gronax remain bound by instinctual imperatives of their evolutionary past. Images appeared of a Gronax, bipedal but hunched, with strong exoskeletons and multiple compound eyes set in a streamlined head. The mandibles that dominated the lower face opened and closed in a constant, unsettling movement. The Gronax built battleships before they developed a concept of trade, the commander continued. They achieved faster-than-light travel while still acting on pack-hunting instincts. They do not seek negotiation. They do not recognize surrender. Their neural structures cannot process concepts like mercy or ceasefire. Sorgara removed the glasses, unable to stomach more. She had studied xenobiology enough to understand what the commander wasn't saying explicitly. Their world wasn't being conquered. It was being hunted. To the Gronax, Hanaria was simply a new hunting ground, and her people were merely prey. As night fell, Sorgara huddled by her window, watching distant flashes illuminate the northern horizon. Each burst of light represented incalculable devastation. Homes destroyed, lives ended, centuries of knowledge and culture reduced to ash. She found herself counting the flashes, as if quantifying the destruction might somehow contain it, make it comprehensible. 1, 2, 3. By the time she reached 500, her eyes burned with unshed tears. The small human message remained her only fragile connection to hope. Hold on, we are coming. As if humans, with their brief lives and limited technology, could achieve what the mighty Alliance would not attempt. That is what she told herself to prevent hope from blinding her. 3 days passed in a blur of distant explosions and deteriorating broadcasts. Government communications became sporadic, then cryptic, then ceased entirely when all satellites were destroyed. Sorgara followed instructions to remain indoors, rationing her scarce food supplies with care. By the 5th day, her carefully organized storage contained nothing but empty containers. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, making concentration difficult. The government's last broadcast had been 18 hours earlier, a garbled message about maintaining shelter protocols. Sorgara pressed her face against the cool glass of her window, looking out at her untended fields. The bova fruit would be ripe now, hanging heavy on vines just visible from the house. The government had been explicit. Remain indoors at all costs. The Gronax deployed hunter drones to seek out isolated individuals, but hunger made decisions where reason faltered. They will find me eventually, whether I starve inside or harvest outside, she murmured, her voice raspy from disuse. The choice, when framed that way, became simple. Sorgara moved with caution, remaining low as she slipped through her door and into the open air. The familiar scent of her land, rich soil and ripening fruit, contrasted jarringly with the acrid tinge of distant fires. She kept her eyes on the bova vines, estimating she would need only minutes to gather enough food for several days. The sky remained overcast, occasional gaps in the cloud cover revealing glimpses of orbital battles still raging above. The ground vibrated periodically with distant impacts, but her immediate surroundings remained eerily peaceful, as if her small corner of Hanaria existed in a separate reality from the invasion. She had filled half her harvest bag when a faint buzzing sound caused her to freeze mid-reach. Gronax drones were distinguishable by their biological components, part machine, part genetically modified Gronax sensory organs. This unnatural fusion created surveillance devices with instinctual hunting patterns. The buzzing grew louder, and Sorgara carefully calculated her options. The drone would detect movement. Her home was 20 meters away, too far to reach before being spotted. The bova vines offered minimal concealment. The irrigation ditch to her left provided the only practical hiding place. With a fluid motion belying her mid-age, Sorgara slid into the shallow ditch, pressing her body into the damp earth. The buzzing intensified as the drone passed overhead, its sensors sweeping the area in predictable patterns. Solgara controlled her breathing, forcing her body to stillness as centuries of life experience took over. Minutes passed in agonizing slowness before the drone moved on, its buzzing fading toward the western fields. Solgara remained motionless, knowing the devices often doubled back to catch prey that emerged too quickly. Another 5 minutes passed before she dared raise her head slightly above the ditch rim, only for her to be forced to hide again immediately. The drone continued patrolling the fields, drawing closer to her position. Just as the buzzing grew so loud that she thought her life was over, a new sound replaced it. A high-pitched whine cutting through the atmosphere from above. Solgara looked up to see a streak of fire descending from the clouds, its trajectory placing the impact precisely close to her. A final Gronax bombardment, she thought with resigned clarity. After failing to hide from the drone, she would die from orbital fire. But as the object neared, she realized its descent was controlled. Not a weapon, but a small craft breaking through the atmosphere at dangerous velocity. A shuttle, unlike anything in Hanarian or Gronax design. Deployed emergency braking thrusters mere hundreds of meters above the ground, kicking up massive clouds of dust and debris as it executed an emergency landing in her eastern field. As she was distracted by the landing, the drone changed trajectory, its programming identifying the new arrival as a priority target. It accelerated towards the crashed shuttle, its weapon systems glowing as they activated. Solgara watched, transfixed, as the shuttle's door burst open. A figure emerged, unmistakably human despite the protective suit, moving with surprising agility in Hanaria's lighter gravity. The drone fired, a pulse of energy narrowly missing as the human rolled to one side. The human's response was immediate. A compact weapon appeared in their hand, tracking the drone's movement with precision. A single shot produced a blinding flash, and the drone dropped to the ground, its systems completely disabled. Solgara remained frozen in the irrigation ditch, uncertain whether to flee or approach. The decision was made for her as the human turned directly toward her hiding place, somehow sensing her presence despite the distance. The suit's helmet retracted, revealing features that struck Solgara as simultaneously foreign and similar. Distinctly human, yet somehow resonant with memory. The human approached with cautious steps, weapon lowered but ready. When they spoke, the universal translator rendered their words in perfect Hanarian. "Are you Solgara?" the human asked, eyes narrowing slightly. "Solgara of the Eastern Agricultural District?" She rose slowly from the ditch, plant hair shedding leaves from the extended stress. "I am," she confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. The human studied her intently, doubt flickering across their features. "You're really Solgara? The one who saved a human child from the Gronax on Trading Outpost 7? "Yes," she replied, straightening to her full height despite the trembling in her limbs. "Though I'm surprised any human would remember that incident after 25 years. "We live shorter lives than you, but not as short as you think." A smile transformed the human's face, revealing an unexpected warmth. "My name is Logan Petrov," he said, extending his hand in the human greeting custom. "And you're safe now. Come with me." Solgara stared at the offered hand, connections forming slowly in her overwhelmed mind. The child she had saved, the message she had sent, the impossible response, "Hold on, we're coming." Humanity had arrived. Logan's hand remained extended, steady and expectant. Solgara hesitated only a moment before taking it, the sensation of human skin strange against her grasp. He pulled her up with surprising strength, supporting her weight as her legs trembled from days of minimal food and movement. "We need to move quickly," he said, glancing towards the sky. "That drone won't be the last. The Gronax have this entire region marked for ground infiltration." Solgara followed his gaze upward, noticing new patterns of light flashing through the cloud cover. "Those aren't bombardments," she realized aloud. "No," Logan confirmed, guided her toward his shuttle with an arm around her shoulders. That's the human fleet engaging the Gronax in the upper atmosphere. They're providing cover for our extraction operations. The shuttle looked worse up close, its hull scorched from atmospheric entry, one stabilizer visibly damaged. As they approached, Sorgara could see the craft bore no military insignia, just a simple corporate logo she didn't recognize. "This doesn't look like a military vessel," she observed, her xenobiologist's mind automatically cataloguing the differences. Logan's mouth quirked in what Sorgara recognized as a human expression of irony. "It's not. It's a tourist shuttle from a cruise ship." At her confused look, he added, "We didn't exactly have time to mobilize the army. We came with what we had." The shuttle's interior was cramped, clearly designed for short recreational trips rather than rescue operations in an active war zone. Logan helped her into a seat before taking the controls. "Strap in," he instructed. "This will be rough." The shuttle lifted on struggling thrusters, banking sharply to avoid a stand of tall trees. Through the scratched viewport, Sorgara watched her home shrink beneath them. The house, the fields, the life she had built over centuries, reduced to a rapidly diminishing patch of green amid spreading destruction. "Your world is beautiful," Logan said quietly, navigating through turbulent air currents. "Even now." Sorgara didn't respond, her attention caught by what hung in low orbit, an enormous vessel, unlike any military cruiser she'd ever seen. Its lines were smooth and aesthetic rather than tactical, its hull dotted with what appeared to be observation decks and recreation areas. "That's your battle cruiser?" she asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Logan actually laughed. "The SS Celestial Voyager, 6-star luxury cruise liner, currently serving as our impromptu flagship." His expression sombered. "When we received your message, there wasn't time for official channels, so we improvised." The shuttle shuddered violently as they passed through a debris field, remnants of orbital defenses and destroyed Gronax vessels. Logan's hands moved with precision over the controls, compensating for the small craft's limitations. After several tense minutes, they docked in what appeared to be a hastily converted loading bay. As the shuttle powered down, Logan turned to her with unexpected gravity. "Sorgara, I need to prepare you. What you're about to see isn't a coordinated military operation. It's complicated." Before she could ask for clarification, the shuttle door opened to reveal organized chaos. The luxury cruise ship's cargo bay had been transformed into an emergency triage center. Dozens of Hanarians lay on makeshift beds, repurposed lounge chairs and dining tables, while humans in civilian clothes administered first aid. Medical equipment, seemingly assembled from the ship's infirmary and personal supplies, was being used in ways clearly outside its intended purpose. Logan helped her navigate through the crowded space, nodding to fellow humans who acknowledged him with obvious respect. They had reached a small alcove that had once been a storage room, now hastily converted to a medical station. A human in casual clothing with a small insignia pinned to their shirt approached, scanner in hand. "Standard check for injuries and contaminants," the medic explained, running the device over Sorgara's form. "You're in remarkably good condition compared to most we've rescued from your region." Sorgara sank onto the edge of a cushioned bench, suddenly overwhelmed. "I don't understand," she said, her gaze moving from Logan to the busy scene beyond. "Why are you here? How did humans respond when the Alliance refused?" The medic withdrew tactfully, leaving Logan leaning against the doorframe. "Rest first," he said. "Explanations can wait." "No," Sorgara insisted, rising to her feet despite her exhaustion. "I cannot rest while my planet burns. I cannot flee while my people suffer. I must return to the surface, help with evacuations, do something." Her plant hair wilted visibly, small leaves detaching and drifting to the floor as her distress manifested physically. The cramped room made her sudden agitation more pronounced as she moved towards the door. Logan didn't block her path, but his words stopped her more effectively than any physical barrier. "Humanity has joined the war," he stated simply, his tone matter of fact. "This will be over in a day or two. You can rest now. Putting yourself at risk won't help anyone." Sorgara froze, disbelief evident in her posture. She turned slowly, studying his face for any sign of deception or bravado. "That's impossible," she finally said. "The Gronax hunting fleets have devastated worlds far more technologically advanced than Earth. Even the Alliance feared direct confrontation." In response, Logan merely gestured towards a small porthole. Through it, Sorgara could see distant flashes of light, precise, coordinated patterns of fire that symmetrically targeted Gronax vessels. As she watched, a Gronax dreadnought split apart under concentrated energy bombardment, its destruction oddly silent from their orbital vantage point. "3 questions," Sorgara said, turning back to Logan. "I have 3 questions that need answering before I can accept what you're telling me." Logan nodded, a hint of respect flickering in his eyes. "Ask." "First, how could humanity possibly defeat the Gronax so quickly when established galactic powers fear to engage them directly?" A small smile played at the corners of Logan's mouth. "Humanity has never lost a space war," he said with quiet confidence. "We're not that technologically superior to many species, but we're very, very good at war, and we excel at killing things." The blunt assessment carried no pride, only a pragmatic acceptance. The Gronax evolved as pack hunters. Humans evolved as persistent predators. Different evolutionary strategies for obtaining food, but we've had much more practice applying our instincts to warfare. Our story with wars is complicated. Something in his tone made Sorgara shiver slightly. She moved to her second question. "Why would humanity risk itself for Hanaria? We've maintained minimal diplomatic relations. We've had no strategic alliance, no valuable resources you need." Logan hesitated, his expression softening. "The story of a lone alien who saved a human child from a predatory Gronax went viral when your message reached Earth," he explained. "Social media campaigns, public petitions, politicians couldn't ignore the outcry. The public demanded action." "You expect me to believe your species launched an interstellar rescue mission because of public opinion?" Sorgara's disbelief was evident. "That a campaign mobilized what appears to be private vessels and civilian volunteers to confront the Gronax?" "Not exactly, but the campaign helped a lot with money," Logan admitted. "Which brings us to your third question." "Who are you, really?" Sorgara asked directly. "And why did you rescue me from my farm, when there are so many cities that would be more fitting for a rescue mission?" The ship rumbled slightly as it adjusted its orbital position. Through the open doorway, Sorgara could see other rescued Hanarians being escorted to the rest areas, their expressions mirroring her own confusion and tentative hope. "I started the campaign, Sorgara," Logan said after a long pause. "I'm the child you saved on Trading Outpost 7. The revelation hung in the air between them, simultaneously impossible and obvious. Sorgara studied his face, the determined set of his jaw, the confidence in his movements that believed his apparent youth. How could this be the terrified child she had protected? "But you're—" she began. 29 years old, he supplied. "Human lifespans are shorter than Hanarians, but not as brief as you seem to think." "The coincidence is too great," Sorgara protested. "That you would receive my specific message after all this time." "No coincidence," Logan explained. "After you saved me, I became obsessed with learning everything about space. I found a space security company specializing in protection of merchants. When your message came, it was automatically flagged for my attention." "You own a security company with a private fleet?" Sorgara asked, incredulous. "And you personally came to extract me from a war zone?" Logan's expression grew complicated. "I owed you a debt, and yes, I have resources. The Celestial Voyager is a client's vessel that happened to be in range. My company provides security for most major human cruise lines. Sorgara's mind struggled to process this information. But you couldn't be that child, she insisted, her voice crackling slightly. The child called himself Gorna, the great galactic explorer. An unexpected laugh echoed in the now empty medical alcove. Logan ran a hand through his hair in what Sorgara recognized as a gesture of embarrassment. Human children have big imaginations, he explained, a flush coloring his cheeks. I was going through a phase of creating grand aliases. My mother found it entertaining until it became confusing for everyone else. The weathered table between them bore scratches from countless previous messengers. Logan traced one particular scratch with his finger, a nervous habit that made him suddenly seem younger. I did dream of being an explorer, he admitted. Life had other plans. Security work pays better than exploration. Less romantic, but more practical. He glanced up as the ship's announcement system called for additional personnel to the bridge. Would you like to see the viewing deck? You'd have a better perspective on what's happening. He led her through narrow corridors with exposed pipes and wiring, where crew members rushed past on urgent tasks, nodding respectfully to Logan as they passed. They climbed a squeaking metal staircase to the upper level, where Logan used his security badge to access a restricted area. Double doors opened to reveal what had once been the crown jewel of the cruise ship, a bowl-shaped glass structure extending outward from the hull, designed to give wealthy passengers an unobstructed view of the cosmos. Simple benches arranged around the perimeter showed signs of wear from years of use, but the view they offered was breathtaking. Sorgara gasped involuntarily as the full panorama of her world spread beneath them. From this vantage point, the pattern of the conflict became clear. Human vessels pushing Gronax ships away from population centers, creating safe corridors for smaller craft to conduct evacuations. We'll restore your world, Logan said quietly, standing beside her at the viewing rail. Our missiles are hitting the targets, and some small countries are constantly joining the fight. The Gronax will be driven back. You have my word. The gentle vibration on the deck beneath their feet as the ship maneuvered to a new position seemed to underscore his promise. Sorgara found herself believing in him, against all logic and experience. 2 days had passed since their conversation in the viewing deck. Sorgara stood in the same spot, hands rested lightly on the railing, watching her world below. The transformation was remarkable. Where before there had been constant flashes of weapons fire and the glow of burning cities, now there was silence and stillness. The skies of Hanaria had cleared of smoke enough to reveal the natural beauty of the landscape, vast forests, winding rivers, and the patchwork of agricultural districts stretching to the horizon. Scattered debris floated in orbit, remnants of destroyed Gronax vessels. The human ships patrolled at regular intervals, some already beginning preparations to depart now that the immediate threat had been neutralized. The first rays of sunrise crept across the planet's curved edge, bathing the viewing deck in a golden light. The space around her had changed as well. What had been a private sanctuary during their initial conversation was now bustling with activity. Crew members moved efficiently through the area, reconfiguring the ship for its return to civilian use. Other rescued Hanarians had discovered the peaceful vantage point, some meditating quietly on benches while others engaged in hushed conversations about rebuilding efforts. It's almost hard to believe, Logan said, joining her at the railing. 48 hours ago, we weren't sure we could hold the orbital line. Sorgara turned slightly, noting the fatigue evident in his posture. You haven't slept, she observed. Neither have you, he countered with a small smile. She returned her gaze to the planet below. I wanted to thank you, she said, the words feeling woefully inadequate. What your people have done for mine, she trailed off, unable to articulate the enormity of the debt. No thanks necessary, Logan replied. Basic human reciprocity. You save one of ours, we save your planet. Seems fair. His tone was light, clearly attempting humor to ease her obvious discomfort with gratitude. Sorgara couldn't match his casual demeanor. The disproportionate exchange weighed on her. One child saved versus an entire civilization preserved. How could conventional expressions of thanks possibly suffice? What gesture could acknowledge such an imbalance? Her plant hair shifted slightly in response to her internal turmoil. A subtle movement that caught Logan's attention, though he didn't understand its significance. The flowers nestled among the foliage had begun to brighten, their colors intensifying in ways that would have been instantly recognizable to another Hanarian. "The first shuttles will begin returning people to safe areas tomorrow," Logan said, misinterpreting her silence as concern. "Recovery teams have already established ground operations in the least damaged regions. Your home area was fortunate. Minimal structural damage. You could be back in your fields within days." Sorgara nodded absently, her mind elsewhere. A sudden inspiration straightened her posture, her hand moving hesitantly to one of the flowers growing among her plant hair. The gesture was deeply significant in Hanarian culture, something she had performed only twice in her 3 centuries of life. The particular flower she selected was special, a vibrant indigo bloom with iridescent edges that caught the light in hypnotic patterns. In Hanarian tradition, the symbiotic flowers were more than mere decoration. They were extensions of self, living embodiments of connection to their world. To separate one and offer it to another was the ultimate expression of gratitude and respect. Her fingers paused, uncertainties flooding her mind. Would a human understand such a gesture? Would he comprehend its significance, or would the cultural context be lost entirely? The physical separation of the flower would be uncomfortable. These plants were connected to her nervous system in subtle ways, but the symbolic meaning made such discomfort irrelevant. With delicate precision, she carefully detached the flower from its stem, suppressing a wince at the brief neural feedback. The bloom remained vibrant in her palm, its natural biochemistry ensuring it would not wither for weeks, perhaps months. "Logan," she said formally, turning to face him directly. "In our culture, we have few material possessions and fewer ceremonial exchanges. But there is one tradition reserved for moments of profound gratitude." She extended her hand, the flower resting on her palm. "This is a symbiotic bloom from my own plant hair. It is a part of me. Our biology allows us to share these only rarely, and the gesture is considered our highest expression of thanks." Logan's confusion was evident as he looked at the offered flower. "It's beautiful," he said carefully. "But if it's a part of you, I can't accept removing it. I wouldn't want to harm you." "The separation has already occurred," she explained patiently. "Its acceptance honors the sacrifice. Refusal would be—" She searched for a term he might understand. "It would compound the neural feedback significantly." His expression shifted to concern. "Does it hurt you?" "That is not relevant to the ceremonial meaning," she replied, the flower still extended. Logan hesitated a moment longer before carefully accepting the bloom, his weathered fingers contrasting with its delicate structure. "I'm honored," he said, and though he couldn't fully comprehend the significance, his sincerity was evident. Several Hanarians across the viewing deck had noticed the exchange, their reactions ranging from shock to solemn approval. Such gifts were rare enough that even in their traumatized state, they recognized the gravity of what they had witnessed. The flower nestled in Logan's palm seemed to pulse slightly, reacting to his body heat and the ship's atmosphere. He studied it with genuine wonder before carefully securing it in his breast pocket of his uniform, positioning it so the bloom was visible. The formal moment passed, leaving a changed atmosphere between them. Something in Sorgara's posture had relaxed, as if the weight of inadequate gratitude had finally lifted. "So," Logan said, his tone lightening, Since informal human customs would suggest buying you a drink isn't an option on this ship right now, I should probably check if you need anything else before you return planetside. Sorgara surprised herself with a small laugh. Your informal human customs involve strange rituals I've studied with some fascination, though I admit the concept of purchasing liquids for one another as a social bonding mechanism remains puzzling. Not as puzzling as giving someone a piece of your head as a thank you gift, Logan countered with a grin. We tend to keep our body parts to ourselves. A cultural difference worth noting, Sorgara agreed, finding herself mirroring his more relaxed demeanor. Though I suspect there are more similarities between our species than difference, beneath the surface. Speaking of surfaces, Logan said, his gaze shifting back to the planet below, I should probably get you home soon. I imagine being away from your soil for this long is, uncomfortable. Sorgara studied his face, noticing details she had overlooked before. The faint scar at his temple, the lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often despite his dangerous profession. It's difficult to reconcile the man before me with the child I remember, she said. You were so small, so frightened. Children grow up, he replied simply. Very quickly, from my perspective, she said, reaching up to lightly touch his cheek in a gesture of wonder. Logan caught her hand, holding it firmly but gently. And I still have trouble believing you're the same person who rescued me, he said, looking directly into her eyes. I expected to find some kind of elderly grandmother figure, not someone like... He trailed off, seemingly searching for appropriate words. Someone like what? Sorgara asked directly. Logan laughed, releasing her hand and taking a step back. Someone who would need immediate evacuation back to her homeworld, he deflected smoothly. Which we should arrange, right away. Urgent priority. You're avoiding my question, she observed. She didn't press further. The ship's announcement system provided timely interruption, notifying passengers that the first return shuttles were being prepared for planetary landing. That's our cue, Logan said, gesturing towards the exit. Let's get you home. The descent to Hanaria's surface was considerably smoother than their hasty departure had been. The shuttle, a different, better-maintained vessel than the one that had rescued her, glided through clear skies, navigating around debris with practiced ease. Sorgara's farm came into view, remarkably intact compared to surrounding areas. Her fields showed signs of neglect from her absence, but the sturdy plants had survived. The shuttle settled gently on a flat area near her home. As the door opened and the ramp extended, Sorgara felt a rush of emotion at the familiar sense of her land. She stepped onto the soil of her homeworld with reverent slowness, her body instantly responding to the return to familiar gravity and atmosphere. Logan remained at the shuttle's entrance. Recovery teams will be in the area regularly, he assured her, and I'll check on you periodically during reconstruction. The moment of farewell stretched awkwardly between them, neither knowing quite how to conclude such an extraordinary shared experience. Thank you, she said simply, knowing the words remained insufficient but having no better alternative. Just returning the favor, he replied with a small smile. As the shuttle lifted off, Sorgara watched until it disappeared into the clouds. The flower she had given him, a permanent part of herself now carried across the stars, remained a real connection between them, a living symbol of a debt that could never truly be balanced.